Hi, I'm Kathy from the Delfield Quilt Company. Today's video is about block number 3 of the 2024 Sew Along. If you're new here, welcome. If you are returning, thanks for coming back. If you can't tell, I'm camping. And that's Charlie. He's in the camper and very unhappy that I'm outside videotaping, talking to all of you. This video is about block number 3 of the 2024 Quilt Along. If you're sewing along, that is awesome. I would love to see the blocks that you're working on. I'm going to put a link to an email and our Instagram page. So if you're willing to share your pictures, you can either email or tag me on Instagram. All right, block number 3 does require some foundation paper piecing patterns, which you can download for free on the website, delfieldquiltco.com. And if you don't have a printer, I'm also selling some printed copies for $2 that include the shipping in that as well, and I'll ship those out to you. All right, let's get started with block number 3. Before we begin block 3, just make sure you visited our website and downloaded the foundation paper piecing pattern. It is free to download. And when you print it, just make sure that you choose 100% output, and if you use the lightest paper that you have, I've used a special foundation paper to print mine. Okay, once you have these printed, you're going to go ahead and just cut loosely around the patterns. If you have paper scissors, that's the best, because you don't want to ruin your good sewing scissors. All right, I'm just going to start with these two, but you're going to want to get all of your patterns cut out. And for the fabric, I did come up with a few cut sizes for recommendations. You could try to cut these to fit yourself, but I thought I'd just try to save a little bit of time for all of you. And for the fabric, here are the cuts that you need that will fit the foundation paper piecing. All right, let's get started. We're going to first start with this section here. I'm using the H1, H2, H3. And make sure you download the instructions for this because I tell you what size block goes with each section. Right, for H1, we are going to use background fabric, and we're going to use the one that is 4.5 inch square that is cut diagonally in half. So it's a half triangle of that square. I've already got mine here. And then for H2, we're going to use the 4.5 inch square that was cut in half as well for this one of that buttercup color. And then for H3, we're using the popsicle color, and that's going to be the 6 inch square that's cut diagonally in half as well. And foundation paper piecing, if you've never done this before, it's super simple, and it helps you get nice crisp lines without having to repiece things together. I love this method. It does take a little time to tear the paper off, but I think it's a way to have like really intricate designs. It would be really hard to do without this paper in the normal piecing method. So to start, you're going to want to flip the pattern over, and it's helpful if you have a light source near you, like a window. You want to try your best to be able to see through the paper so you can see the lines, because that will help you line up your pieces. And you're going to start with H1, or whatever is first on your pattern. There should always be a number 1 on the patterns. I'm going to place this background piece, and I want to make sure it covers all the edges of the H1, and if you can, 1/4 inch at least going beyond the line. And this is where it's really helpful if you have a light source near you that you can shine it up to the light, and you can usually see the lines right through the back here. And then we're going to place H2, and that is going to be the buttercup one. So for this one, it's going to go like this and fold open, and we want to pretty much line it up with where we put H1. And it's sometimes really helpful just to pin it in place, especially if you're new to foundation paper piecing. Sometimes it can be a little hard because you're working backwards essentially. And then you pin it, and I pinned it right on this line here where I'm going to be sewing. And then you can flip it over, and that way you can make sure that you're going to cover the entire H2 piece once it's sewn on. Mine looks like it's placed pretty well, so I'm going to go ahead and take it to the sewing machine. You can leave the pin in there. Sometimes it just helps to kind of keep that in place. And you are going to sew from the top, so you want to make sure if you're using pins, which I recommend if you do, that you have your pin on the top so you can grab it out when you need to. All right, then on the sewing machine, I'm going to stitch right on this line. I am going to stitch in this blank part between the line where the line stops and the seam allowance here. And I'm going to do that on this side too. And you probably want to go with a shorter stitch length on this. It'll make tearing off the paper at the end so much easier. So I'm probably going to use a 1.8, 1.5. Okay, and when you're sewing this, you just want to make sure that that line is centered and so that your needle's going to fall right on it. Got it sewn right on the line. Take out my pin here. And now I'm just going to double check before I cut anything off. I'm just going to hold it up to my light source again just to make sure that when I flip it over I've fully covered the line here. It looks like I did. And then I'm going to just carefully fold this paper back and I'm going to just trim this down so it's about 1/4 inch. I might actually go a little bit less than 1/4 inch just to have less bulk on my block as I work through it. Okay. And then I'm just going to press it, and I'll press that open there. And with foundation paper, you should be able to press it pretty easily. If you ordered from our website, it came folded in an envelope. You probably just want to maybe press them a little bit before you start, just to flatten it out. Now we're going to move on to H3. So same thing as before. I want to make sure when it's flipped open, it's going to cover the entire H3 piece. And again, if you want to double check, you could use that a pin right on that sewing line. And then once you flip it, it should cover the whole thing. Alright, mine looks pretty good, so I am going to go ahead then and sew right on this line between H2 and H3. Okay, now that's sewn, I'm just going to double check and make sure I sewed it enough. Looks like it's going to be good. And then I'm going to trim off the excess again, just like I did before. Again, I'm going to just press that open then. Alright, I'm going to set this one aside and then work on the second one here. Okay, this one again, I have provided cutting instructions for the fabric you need for each of these pieces here. Now we're going to start with B1. That one should be pretty simple because it's just a triangle. Again, you want to just make sure you're going to be covering all of the edges here. And then I'm going to actually just fold the corner of this back just so I can see where I need to place B2 because it's a triangle in there. And then I know it's going to fall about there, and then I'm going to scooch it up just so I have the seam allowance. And I'll test it like I did the other ones. And sometimes you just need to readjust it a little bit just to make sure that you don't end up short. I've had a lot of times where I've sewn these on and then I go to flip them and they don't fully cover the lines of the pattern. And then when you're ready, you can go ahead and sew on that line. Okay, and then this one, I'm going to just trim like I did before. Make sure you fold the pattern out of the way so you don't cut the pattern. And press. Okay, now we're ready to move on to B3 here. And B3 is going to be this big square here. And you just want to make sure it's going to cover the entire side. And then we can sew on that line. And just like before, we're going to trim the excess here. And then press. Alright, so hopefully you're getting the hang of this. It's kind of just one of those rinse and repeat type projects where I'm just making sure the pieces line up, following the order, and then sewing on the line. Okay, now this piece is going to be done as well. And you're basically going to just repeat that process for all of the other pieces. The one piece that you don't really need to sew is this I1 using fabric 4. I did give you the measurement to cut it exactly, but I did have this as part of the pattern in case you did want to use that as a template. Okay, now we just need to trim these pieces off. And even though there's lines here for the seam allowance, I do like to use the ruler just so I have make sure I have a consistent 1/4 inch all the way around. And so I'm just going to use the markings on my ruler. I'm going to line up a 1/4 inch right on the solid line. And it should line up pretty well with the dashed line. Then I'm just going to cut and turn and just repeat that process until the entire piece is trimmed down. And you only want to cut the perimeter of these. So basically where you see the dashed lines is where you want to cut. This method does create a lot of garbage, so make sure you have a garbage can nearby. And then B1 is all trimmed up. Alright, so I've already got all of my pieces done. My little garbage pile here. Now I'm just going to lay this out. Now I probably should have started with this, but there is going to be one Y seam in here, but it's okay. It'll be fine. It's not too difficult to do. But you'll see what I mean when we get to this adding the centerpiece. There's really no way to do that without putting that Y seam in there. I gotta remember how these all go together. It's quite a puzzle. Probably should use the reference photo. Okay, so I've got it laid out here. And unless I looked at that reference photo, there's no way I would have figured out how to get these pieces together. But let me show you kind of my thought in putting this together, because it's a little tricky with this diamond, the square in the middle here. First, I'm going to put that square onto this piece here, and I'm going to use the edges of the pattern, and I'm basically going to sew that from the edge at the 1/4 inch seam, and then I'm going to stop a 1/4 inch before the end of this square here. The reason I'm doing that is because when we go to make the Y seam, I'm going to need that little bit of gap to be able to join the other piece to it. So I'm just going to take my ruler and measure out a 1/4 inch. I'm going to start with this guy then. Okay, it's a little hard to see with my color thread, but I stepped right on that line there. And then I'm just going to press this open. And then I'm going to move on to this piece here, and I'm going to line up the corners of the pattern, so right here and here. And if you line those up, it should fit pretty nicely on that kind of that Y corner there. And then I'm going to sew from edge to edge the 1/4 inch seam line. And then I'm going to press this piece open. And I'm going to sew in the next one. Again, lining up these corners. And again, a 1/4 inch seam allowance on this piece. So far pretty easy, right? Till we get to that last part. But I don't think that'll be too bad. Okay, we're getting to that part where we're going to start sewing the pieces into this section here. Right, so to do this part's it's already marked for me, so I'm going to stop sewing at this point right here. I'm going to actually probably fold this piece out of the way so that I can line that section up. And it's okay to bend these because we'll iron this later. I want to fold it back, that corner here, so that I can line this piece up all to the edge here. And then I'm going to carefully sew this on, making sure I stop right at that corner and just make sure that you don't go into this other section here. That's why it's nice to kind of fold that back a little bit. Okay, I've got that sewn on. You can see I stopped at that corner. So I have a little bit of gap here, 1/4 inch. And I'm just going to press this and then we'll get that last piece on. Alright, now I have my finished block and I'm going to go ahead and just tear off the paper. And you want to be careful when you're tearing your paper off, just to make sure you don't tear out any of those stitches you put in. Alright, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you haven't yet, please subscribe and visit our little quilt shop at delphioquiltco.com. Have a wonderful day.